Hello everyone, 1302. Speaking to you today about your final assessment for the fall semester of 2025. Now, this is not going to be a final exam in a traditional sense of the word. It is what we call in the teaching lingo an alternative assessment. And so I want to walk you through how to find the best success on this, since it is indeed, if you will notice, worth 250 points. Okay? And so it's very important that you understand the significance of this and how many points this truly is worth. Now, I also want to point out to you that this assignment is due on or before December the 5th, okay? Now, that is the Friday before finals week starts for Lone Star College. You can turn it in early if you so desire, but it will be due by 11:59 p.m. on this date, okay? And so let's walk through this a little bit at a time so that you will be able to do the best work, get the highest grade possible. So you are to do, first thing you're supposed to do is I've given you 2 decades here, the 80s and the 90s, if you will. So you are to choose one of these two, okay? Then you go and choose a second decade from the 2000s all the way up to 2019. So in total, you're going to be dealing with 2 decades here. Now, as you start this assignment, there's going to be a lot of Googling. There's going to be a lot of probably questions that you have. And so I want to walk you through and give you some important pointers. So the first thing it says to research the following. Now, of course, in your world, that means to Google. It means to stay away from Wikipedia. Okay? And I've given you some places to go to look for the proper way to go and find the material that you need. And so the first thing you're going to research is who were the presidents during the decades that you've chosen. Okay? So who were the presidents you chose 1 or 2 here? And then you chose your second decade. So you're going to do a presentation on who the president was, the years that they were elected. Very simple information. Then you're going to start digging for information. You need to find a minimum of 4, okay? Minimum, that means you're striving for a C, okay? So a minimum of 4. You want to find more than 4, okay? And that encompasses decades, the first set of decade, the second decade. So a minimum of 4. What were some of the social movements of this time period? Now, what were the causes of these movements? How did they change America? This is very important. And how did they change the way we look at different things? And so I gave you some examples here. Examples of social movements include civil rights, women's suffrage. We could say the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, the environment, racial equality, women's rights, police brutality, climate change. Some of you are y'all are really big on climate change. Other examples can be the rights of workers, LGBTQ rights, anti-war, movements for disability rights, animal rights, gun control. Those are examples, and you are certainly welcome to use them. Now, be aware that, for example, Black Lives Matter does not apply to the 80s or the 90s as far as a movement is concerned. Now, when you do your research, and do it very simple. A lot of you really have not learned the concept of in Google, ask the question very plainly. In the Google search box, you would do the following. What were the major social movements from 1980 to 1989? See, it's a simple question. And then it's just going to pop up with all kinds of things. The social movements of 2000 to 2009 search. You've got to ask lots of questions. Then what were the cultural changes that comes about? And once again, culture is the characteristics and knowledge of a particular group of people encompassing language, religion, cuisine, social habits, music, and arts. For example, one of the things, because I love music so much, one of the social movements I might check out would be the rise of hip hop. Okay, in the 80s and early 90s, the rise of grunge music. And so, once again, go into Google and ask the question, what were the major religious changes from 1980 to 1989? What changes did we see in food? Ask a very specific question, and you're going to get lots and lots of answers. And what you have to do, both with the social movements and with the cultural changes, is you have to explain how these movements changed America. Because all of this changed the world that I was teaching in from 1980 to 1989 changed dramatically. Same thing for the 90s. And for sure, same thing for any of the 2000s decades. You have got to explicitly explain how this changed America. Now remember, it is 4 minimal for both of these. 4 minimal for cultural and social. That's a C. You got it? That's a C on this section. It's a 70 at best. And I'm saying this over and over because if you go in and do your research and you do it thoroughly, you're going to see what I'm talking about very quickly. Then, of the 2 decades that you chose, a minimum of 2 major political scandals. Something involving the government, elected officials, the president, anybody that is involved in politics. Okay? Famous trials, famous scandals, assassination attempts. I'm going to tell you, in the 80s, there was an assassination attempt. Okay, I'm just saying. Minimum of 2. 1 major economic event that impacted the nation and the average American as a whole. Explain what happened to make this important to the average American. I'm going to give you a clue. If you're doing 2000 to 2009, you want to look up the year 2008. That's one thing. Okay? What was a major impactful economic event from the years 2000 to 2009? 2010 to 2019. Okay? From each decade, a minimum of 2, and if you do just a minimum here, we're going to have a serious chat. Technological inventions, medical breakthroughs, the internet, cell phones, chat GTP, blah, 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 blah. You name it. Major medical breakthroughs. This is huge. And it is especially huge. And don't forget to talk about Facebook Instagram, TikTok, X, Twitter, whatever it's called now. Those are all breakthroughs in technology. And I want you to be sure that when you do this, how it changed America. Okay? A minimum of 2 major foreign events from each decade. You got that right here. Okay? Wars, near wars, or events where America used some military intervention or primary diplomatic intervention. Where did we stick our nose? Where did we interject ourselves into other countries' affairs, or us, for example? If you're doing the 80s decade, you have got to do this. This is required. You can't do the 80s and the 90s without talking about drug cartels. Right now, in 2025, the United States is bombing boats and ships in the Caribbean, particularly pinpointing Venezuela because of drug cartels. The 2000s must consist the beginnings of terrorism. If you're doing the 90s, there was a famous event in 1994 involving the World Trade Center. And there was another famous event in Africa in 1998. See, terrorism had its foundations way before 9/11. You also, if you're doing the 90s, you have to talk about Operation Desert Storm. And you need, there's so much here. Early terrorism. Once again, Google the exact question you want answered. And then I just threw in a little bit of fun stuff. What were the 10 top songs from Billboard during these decades? For example, here's the 2000s decades. There's a link that'll tell you what you need. The top movies from the decades. And then the last step, and I consider it maybe the most important step in many ways. On several slides, you're to write your hopes and concerns for you and your family in the next 10 years, when you will, believe it or not, be 26, 27 years old. Many of you will be married. Many of you will have children. What did you learn from this assignment concerning how America reacts and adapts to significant changes and events? Now, all of this is going to be put together in a PowerPoint. And here are some guidelines for the PowerPoint. Use pictures from throughout the decades. You start with Google Images. Now, I went in and I Googled famous photos of the 1990s, for example. Man, oh man, tons of famous pictures from those time periods. And many of those pictures were centered around some of the topics that I'm having you do up here, okay? The more appropriate the pictures, the better. I am not going to give you a number, but the more the better and the more appropriate they are. A minimum of 3 political cartoons for each decade. Now, honestly, what I would do if I were you, I would go and I would start looking here. See, right in here? And I'd be doing all my little bit of research, okay? And then guess what? I'd go find the cartoons that match what you're putting in your information. Do not put too much text on one slide. It's better to have more slides that are readable. No fancy transitions. Keep everything very simple. Make sure that the slide backgrounds and the text can be read. Do not have dark backgrounds with dark text. If I can't read it when I open it, I'm not grading it. Okay. Now, some of you are going to ask, how many slides? I can't tell you. It depends on how high a grade you want to make. How many, see, everything's a minimum. So you want to move away from minimum and you want to head towards maximum. Okay, I can't tell you how many. I'm thinking, I'm not even going to give you a number. You're going to go through here and you are going to go through this very systematically. I'm going to explain to you right now that you need to start on this. Start now. Start now. Yes, you still have work to do. You have guided vocabularies to do. This is what college is all about. Okay? Is doing double tasking in courses. Now, I have talked with Ms. Ross, and we have agreed that you may work with a partner. You don't have to, but here's what you need to understand, and most of you are now understand this from maybe some failures. If you work with a partner, you live and die by that partner. If they don't do the work, you can't blame it on them. The project has to be done. The assessment has to be completed. Some of you are more comfortable working on this alone, okay? And good for you. And I will take that into consideration. But if you work with a partner, you and that partner are attached at the hip when it comes to the grade, okay? So choose your partner wisely. And with this project now being officially put on the table, and with the work that you have left to complete in the course, there's no such thing as a free day. No such thing. So I hope that this has helped you and helps explain what is happening. And as always, I wish you guys and ladies the best of luck. Thank you.